Hey there, my name is Richard Seroder, and welcome to this module in a course introducing the concept of DevOps. This is a big picture course, and so this module helps us see DevOps from a wider viewpoint. First, we'll talk a bit about the ubiquity of software and why being good at this matters. Why do you need to be good at software? We'll look at some of the software development and operational practices that a lot of companies employ today. We'll also do an overview of Lean. How does this apply to software? I'll introduce the concept of DevOps, look at some definitions. We'll discuss how you adjust to a more product mindset, which is a key part of adopting a DevOps frame of mind. And then I'll conclude with some data that actually proves that these DevOps practices really matter a lot. Let's get into it. So we expect to find software, frankly, everywhere. Telehealth is pretty common nowadays, as well as electronic health records. With travel, almost the entire experience is digital now. You have e-tickets, you do ride sharing, all of the experience of going to where I'm trying to get to is powered by software. Customer support, there's artificial intelligence, there's bots that are frontline support, let alone all the customer service software. Of course, even sporting events, getting my tickets, all the sorts of digital engagement that make sports kind of even a software experience now. Of course, our day jobs, if we're in technology or working in the enterprise space, is full of all sorts of software. Even just the classic shopping experience, the retail experience, is taken over by digital engagement. So almost all aspects of our life have some way that software is designed to make it a little bit easier. If you look at some recent data, you can see that consumers are changing their behavior based on who offers a better digital experience. Customers are swapping brands with less loyalty than they had before. At the same time, then, those businesses are realizing they don't have a whole lot of time to change their business model to be more digital, to be more software driven, or else they actually realize there's going to be an impact on the bottom line. You can interpret all this to realize that we as consumers have more buying power than ever. We care more about the digital experience when we're choosing who we want to work with, whether that's a grocery store, a sporting event, a bank. And those companies are now realizing that that digital experience is such a key part of it, meaning they have to get better at software. Let's use a fictitious company to walk through what sometimes the current state looks like for a lot of people, including yourself possibly. Let's talk about Globomantics. In this case, this company might be somewhat common to you. Maybe you work at a company like this. It's a mid-sized enterprise. It was founded a number of years ago. They're not a brand new company. They're in the B2B space. They sell to other businesses. It's not direct to consumer. And they've been able to function successfully for a while now. But all of a sudden, they're seeing that some of their baggage isn't playing off well to a lot of new entrants in their space. These new entrants come in with different type of experiences. They're focused more on the customer experience, different types of software. And so all of a sudden, Globomantics realizes they have to change. They can't rely on how they've been doing things entirely. They've got to evolve a bit with the times. If you look at their IT organization, this may look familiar to you. They've organized in a fairly classic fashion. I've worked in this structure before. Groups are organized by discipline. You have enterprise architecture or development. You have business analysis in their own area. Information security takes care of their own business. Operations, QA. And there are some business units that have a mini version of this structure all to themselves. This kind of structure works fine if you're optimized for cost and efficiency. That's where this came from. But it doesn't work great when you're focused on speed. All of a sudden, a whole new set of pain points start to emerge that slow down the business. Let's look at these pain points in a little bit more detail. Limited automation is hurting Globomantics. They've got a lot of manual builds. It's hard to get infrastructure, and therefore everyone asks for more than what they need. Resizing later is super painful. So in this case, that manual process is actually causing inefficiency and slowdown. They've got, instead of software-defined networking, they've got ticket-defined networking. If you need to update a load balancer or add a firewall rule, get in line. The networking team is overburdened, and it runs through tickets in a queue. Again, that just simply slows some things down because not enough of this is automated. Some of QA's test suites is automated, which is great, but code coverage is a bit spotty, which results in many manual tests. The result, you have really long regression tests when you want to make an update, and a backlog of testable code is just sitting in QA's inbox at all times. Building new environments for production, testing, performance testing, or even development is brutal here. Aspects are automated, but each one requires administrators to then manually stitch together different services and configurations. This slows teams down and forces them to test in environments that don't really even look like production. So limited automation is causing a lot of negative impact here. Let's talk about slow delivery. The company's struggling here. Delivery speed is not up. They're seeing competitors ship much faster than they are. Everything here seems to take forever. New apps, bug fixes, software upgrades, you name it. Going from idea to production, they say it's agile, but the minimum viable product looks suspiciously like a fully built solution. There's very little incremental learning happening here. And the flow is lumpy. There are piles of project proposals sitting in front of project managers. There's stacks of apps that need testing by QA. It's a truckload of code waiting for deployment managers to push it out. There's just a lot of different work sitting in front of different teams. Part of the issue here is a lack of self-service. The company doesn't have much here. Most every test or production change goes through one team, and development teams aren't really empowered to do much on their own. Let's talk about change freezes. There are shopping holidays where no changes are allowed. The problem is, as soon as that change freeze lifts, they dump hundreds of changes into environments at once and then can't easily find the offending code when something inevitably fails. So as much as the change freeze is designed to increase stability, it's actually making things worse. And of course, some of those big bang releases are not doing us any favors either. The incremental releases are tough, and everything gets bunched into these big releases that happen a few times a year, so everyone crams as much as they can into that, inevitably slowing things down even further. So because of this, they don't experiment much. By the time an experiment would ship, they've already moved on. So you end up with a lot of very stale, static sort of stuff, versus experimenting and learning continuously because it just takes too much work to ship. Let's talk about uptime. At Globomantics, uptime problems are really hurting the company's reputation. They're causing some long-standing customers to start looking elsewhere. Specifically, there's a bad change failure rate. Way too many changes result in downtime. And they seem to make the same mistakes over and over again. We know when this happens, we get even more hesitant to ship, right? If it's hard to ship, or if it's something where there's pain afterwards, what do? We do less of it. So it's slowing us down even further. When something does go wrong, getting back online can take hours, frankly, even days. The result is a panic because there isn't much confidence that the system can come back quickly. And that panic means that we get even more distracted when it comes to figuring out what is the actual root cause. We don't have a great playbook to run when there is an issue. Part of this is because the team's always starting at zero when something goes wrong. There's no hit start. There's no shared telemetry I have access to. Everything starts with basic questions, and you have to rule them out first, versus immediately going to where the pain is. We just don't have great telemetry. And because the telemetry we do have is super noisy, most folks frankly ignore the alarms and then miss the actual problems. So over-alerting has exhausted the team. It's not helping our uptime at all. And so there's a lot of attention on architecting to prevent failure versus accepting that failure does happen and optimizing instead for recovery. Let's talk next about security. Sometimes it feels like we only really care about security when something bad happens. The problem here is that many of the security concerns actually still get offloaded to an information security team, and they get applied late in the game when you're about to ship some code. With more environments, including the public cloud, coming into play, they feel the pain of credentials stored and secured in different ways in different places. We're not feeling good about how we're actually keeping our credentials and secrets safe. Container adoption is actually messing with the security approach at Globomantics because now it's not just about golden OS images in your operating system, but it's container images. And then trying to avoid misconfiguration and drift as I have more things running out there. So I'm not really confident about the hardening or the configuration. Now, the secure software supply chain can be a real problem now because many modern custom apps rely on a lot of dependencies. When we pull in JavaScript packages from NPM, when we use Maven for a Java package, when we pull NuGet packages for .NET and the like, we're not always scanning those and confirming that we haven't actually just pulled in a bunch of vulnerabilities or checked them after the fact. I mentioned cloud adoption earlier, and we're seeing a growing chasm between how we secure each environment. This is not consistent. We're seeing a bit of a drift in how we behave. And finally, there's a sense within the company that security is less important than speed. We pay lip service to security, but information security teams often get days or hours to approve an app before shipping without giving it real time to make sure that it doesn't introduce vulnerabilities or have any easy ways to have a security breach. Finally, Globomantics is suffering from a lack of customer focus. Some of these overarching problems really stem from the fact that we haven't started with why. So for many teams, they're thinking about their particular area, not the whole product. Specifically, each department has their own measure of success. Project management teams track delivery dates and budgets. QA teams can track how many defects they found. Dev teams are tracking their features. Ops teams are measuring their uptime, and so on. Everyone defines good a different way. And frankly, there's no shared definition of done either. Each team says they're done when their part is done, versus when the product actually ships and the customer starts getting value from it. So no one team is looking at the big picture. A lot of bugs and defects seem to get postponed to later to achieve a date, make sure we ship on time. But given that here at the company, many teams often disband as soon as that initial production release, these delayed bugs rarely actually get addressed without a whole new project spinning up. Given that the goal is to ship, the teams aren't often thinking about lifecycle management, and because it's hard to ship incremental updates, they rarely instrument the features to observe adoption trends or do A/B testing to improve usability. And even support is interesting here because systems are handed off for steady-state operations pretty quickly, and that means that the general purpose support team takes any problems or questions, and that's okay. But all of a sudden, you just have so many more layers before it's routed to anyone who actually knows anything about the system. You're not getting a quick resolution time. Instead, you're funneling it through a generic team. So where does that leave us? What do all these problems result in for Globomantics? Well, first, they have some poor customer satisfaction. Their customers don't feel heard. They rarely see software improvements emerging. And they worry about security breaches and uptime, given a pretty poor track record of operations here. And look, revenue's down. Customers have options, we talked about this, and rarely have to use one provider or another. Globomantics is seeing customers churn, they're seeing new signups decline, and you're starting to see that attrition is up. And many exit interviews are showing it's because employees are looking for growth and impact, and they're not seeing it here. Some of this is stagnant innovation. You're losing people, you're handling fire drills constantly with production systems, and there's simply less investment in really bold, big bets. This is all causing more of a lack of faith in IT. That lack of velocity, any of the impactful digital experiences that we're seeing from competitors. Some of these teams instead are just self-sourcing their technologies. They're hiring contractors. They're building shadow teams just to get something done. And overall, it's messing with the culture. You're having this us versus them mentality, and we're focused on ourselves versus the customer. And it's impacting how we're performing and really hurting morale. So all of these things are common in a lot of places. The key is, how do we break out of this?